Okay. Thank you for coming to this rescheduled talk. I tried to reschedule it last week, but all the agendas had already gone to print. This is a talk called Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, What's the Vainest Metric of them all? It's also known as Angry Irishman Hates the World, and it has taken inspiration from the rants of Hadi Hariri. You think I'm joking? I'm actually really not. So about me, I work with a company called Pulumi. I love infrastructure and I do a lot of DevOps stuff, and I've been talking about these types of things for a while. But this talk was born out of the absolute rubbish that I've seen in the past couple of years from companies. And it's companies trying to understand their success. Okay, success is like measurable, and companies are trying to come out with a lot more things. If the talk wasn't recorded, or I could guarantee that it was not going to be published, it's a lot more fun because I can actually slag off specific company names. But if you fancy understanding who the companies are, come and talk to me afterwards. I can be bribed for a beer. What are vanity metrics? Anyone want to tell me? Come on. Somebody. Who knows what a vanity metric is? What? Okay. Yes. It's one part of the definition. So a vanity metric is a metric that is indeed something to look good, but it is a metric in which you cannot define any indication of your performance. Okay, so two great examples of vanity metrics: number of Twitter followers, number of Instagram followers. Okay, means 0. I actively used to look for my follower data and find out if I was getting new followers or not. Now I grew up and I realized that it doesn't mean anything. It's a completely pointless metric. So am I saying that all metrics are bad? The answer is no, not at all. But metrics can be construed in a way that makes them look bad. Okay, so let's think about the following scenario. A company creates a new application. Okay, a PR email is created and sent out to 100,000 people, 1 million people, and 100,000 people have arrived on the landing page for the application. Can anybody tell me if that's a vanity metric or not, and why? Everyone's just in here for some quiet time, right? Yeah. Again, the man in the front?
It is.
Why?
Because those 100,000 people don't necessarily indicate anything.
Okay. What do you mean by don't necessarily indicate anything?
The fact that they've gone and seen your page doesn't... Well, okay, you don't know what your goal is there.
Thank you. It's a better way. Okay. So firstly, 100,000 page views doesn't mean anything in itself. Is that 100,000 of the same page views? Like the same bot just hitting it 100,000 times? Is it 100,000 unique page views? Is it actually 100,000 different users in different geolocations actually coming to do something and actually download your application? So a better way to measure this instead is your company creates a new application, the PR email is sent out, 100,000 people arrive on the landing page, and then you would measure the rate of conversion from page view to application downloads. Okay. Of course, you have already got a conversion rate from the emails that went out to the people that landed on the page, but then even further, you can see what further actions people do when they come there. Because 100,000 people landed on the page and not doing anything is completely pointless. It's been a waste of your time creating the application if that's the case and nobody downloads it. So these are called conversion funnels. And conversion funnels are extremely useful because you can really start to understand the user journey through the system. I worked for a company called OpenTable quite a few years ago, like maybe 9 years ago now. And OpenTable were fantastic at this. OpenTable could tell at any point throughout the day how many people should be making reservations on their website, because they understood the traffic patterns, they understood the conversion patterns, and they understood the user journey going through. Now, an indication there would be that if the numbers were up or down, they could quickly identify if there was a problem or if there was something happening in the area that they needed to go investigate. So, for example, an individual restaurant, their conversion metrics went up 50% or 60%. They were able to see if the restaurant had like a reservation special, or a new celebrity chef or something had tweeted about it or something like that. So it's very good to be able to measure all these different conversion points through your application. So how can you identify if a metric is measured in vain. There's 3 steps. 1, can I make a business decision based on this metric? So, let's pretend I'm an Instagram influencer. Okay. And let's pretend that my goal is followers, and I have 1 million followers. Can anybody tell me if 1 million followers means I'm good at my job, or do you need more information based on it? Does anybody care? Not really. Okay, so 1 million followers in itself doesn't mean anything. Okay, because every day for people who are on Instagram, you probably get followed by bots, unfollowed that night. You'll get message requests from all sorts of different places asking you to see pictures and everything like this. So in itself, followers means nothing. Can I intentionally repeat the result? So if I have 1 million followers today and I close my Instagram account, can I open a new account and get 1 million followers back? And 100% yes, the answer. It usually costs in the region of about $50 for 100,000 Instagram followers. So if you want to spend $500, you can get 1 million followers and make it look like you're awesome as an influencer. Okay, so it's very, very easy to mislead people that you're good at what you do. And the last one, is the data a real reflection of the truth? Now what I mean here is that if your goal is to become an Instagram follower, a good influencer actually needs to be able to measure the success of what they're Instagramming about. Okay, sending pictures about, sending links about. So wouldn't it be great if out of your 1 million followers that 100,000 of them or 200,000 of them were actually clicking through from your links into the the suppliers pages and the products pages, because then that actually is a real reflection of what's happening in reality. But we have to be very careful because external factors change what happens with the truth. So in January 2018, Facebook actually changed how data was prioritized on your homepage, on your feed. So what they did is they actually changed it to make local news appear before global news. And I'm not talking about that rubbish where it's most popular and latest. I mean, the actual data sources that they push onto your page now reflect local over global. Okay, so if you imagine you're a local news site or a local product company, all of a sudden your data has gone way up and you don't know why. So you have to be very careful. You're not going to sit there and think, wow, automatically I've just become amazing at my job, even though I haven't done anything. But you have to be aware of that things can happen. You always have to remember is that scientists are they make a hypothesis, they do an experiment, they get the result. They do exactly the same experiment again to make sure the same thing happens. At that point, it's actually a measurable system, and they understand exactly what's happening. The same thing happens with metrics. Okay, if you take a one-off metric and you don't understand why you have that metric, then it's very difficult to understand what it does for you and what it does for your company. So it's important that you actually gather the same metrics again and again, and you can spot the trends over time so you understand if it's correct. So we can apply those 3 questions to any measurement, and it'll help us decide if it's important or not. So let's look at some real-life examples. Sometimes people get offended by some of the things I say here. If you disagree with it, I'm sorry. It's my personal opinion, and it's all based on things I have seen in the past. Okay, number of deploys a day. This is a ridiculous vanity metric. Okay, because number of deploys a day in its current state doesn't really give you any indication into what those deployments are for. This started there was a lot of companies started posting their number of deployments a day. They could do 52 deployments a day and so on and so forth. I'm going to call it an argument on LinkedIn about 3 weeks ago because a company posted that we have 24 developers and we're doing 30 deploys a day. And my response was, is that one feature and 29 bug fixes that you've deployed? Or is it that you have a continuous delivery pipeline and somebody has made 30 changes to the changelog file? Or test, or update test, or anything like that. And they were like, no, the value of the deploy doesn't really matter. I was like, so if the value of the deploy doesn't matter, why are you doing the deploy? And they said it just happens in the background, but it's really nice that our 24 developers are doing 40 deploys a day. It means nothing, right? It means 0 because we're at the point now where we usually decouple deployment from releases. So you can have a release pipeline that release, and at any point you can turn features on and off. Okay, that's what a lot more sophisticated deployment pipelines are doing. So if your metrics are around, we've done 50 deploys a day, and you're doing that, you're actually doing it to make yourselves look good as a development team. I used to do this. I used to do this a lot. We actually had a Grafana dashboard where all 4 teams of the company had it in the corner of each segment of the dashboard. And each team used to compete with each other in order to see who could push the most deploys a day out. And it was a complete waste of time. There's a lot more. Twitter followers, as I said, blog page views. Great. Blog page views is brilliant, but a number of page views in itself doesn't mean anything unless you measure metrics like their bounce rate. How many other pages on your blog do they see? Because fair enough, like blog posts are very useful, but for me, I don't blog to get page views. Like a lot of it is based on things I've done, and I think that's actually quite interesting. And it's like a history of the things that I've done in that area, because I drink a lot and I forget. Greens at the end of a conference talk. By the way, you can vote at the end of this talk, so there's greens, yellows, and reds outside. But greens at the end of a conference talk is a very interesting one. Now, there's maybe 30 people, 35 people in this room. The number of greens I get is automatically going to be lower than a talk that's much more popular. Okay, let's think of this style of talk compared to the release of .NET 3 Core, .NET Core 3, okay, which is like a big thing in the .NET world. And if somebody was here talking about it, they'd have a lot of people at their talk. Now, even if they performed badly and they only got 50% green, if they had 100 people, they would have 50 greens. I have 30 people in here. Even if I get 100% of everyone giving me green, please give me greens, joking, then I would still only have 35. Okay, so the number is not really important. It should be the percentage is much better. Okay, and I've started seeing conferences actually ranking speakers based on the number of greens. Please don't do that. That's bullshit. So that's my one rant. Okay, number of GitHub commits. Anybody know how many GitHub commits they have? No? So this one's funny because I found a website. Oh, I'm not sharing. I actually found a website that ranks all of the GitHub commits of the speakers or of people on GitHub across the world. Okay? And I started looking and I was like, wait a minute. Firstly, that person has 31,000 commits. This person needs a life. But and I started looking down the list and it got to about 5,000, 6,000. And I was like, why, where do I rank on this list? How do I figure in this? And I looked and I said, look, I have 5,933. And I started looking down, there's nothing. And then I realized it's because you need like 1,000 followers. I didn't even know followers on GitHub were a thing. Okay, I'm not Jimmy Bogart, I'm not famous. So followers don't really mean anything. So GitHub commits in itself, again, doesn't mean anything bad or anything useful. Because is it one feature and then 5,000 follow-up, like dots or fixing tests or following, anything like that? So you need to have context about your commits. Like, for example, when I have a pull request, I actually squash my pull request into a single commit at the end. So I have like 20, 30 commits as I go through. And just before, when I merge it, it's squashed down into a single logical commit. So it's much more important that I give context about why I commit something rather than the 500 steps in order to get there. There was a person who posted on Twitter, he said, I have been at this company 2,695 days. I made 6,040 commits and 1,114 PRs. How do you even know that level of data? Like, honestly, how do you know how many pull requests across your entire GitHub organization that you've created? These are such crazy things, like really strange things. Even things like the number of GitHub issues and pull requests. Can anybody realistically tell me how many pull requests they've sent in their development career? No. Build times. I am responsible for telling a lot of people that build time should be under 10 minutes. Really. I used to talk about it at conferences. I used to talk about CI and say, oh, you know, it's really important that if you don't have your build within 10 minutes, then you need to do something about it. You need to spend some time on it. And then I realized it doesn't matter. Now, what matters is extremely useful and fast feedback for developers. Okay, so if you can split your build around, that you can get that development feedback fast, and then you have another process which runs like your entire set of acceptance tests or something that needs to happen, that's much more useful than whether it's below 5 or 6 minutes. A previous company I worked for, and I smile because I've talked to my friends about this a few times. We actually reported up the management chain of how fast our build times were. The people in management actually cared how fast our builds were. Now, they were blown away when we moved from 15-minute builds to 45-second builds. Okay, because they thought, wow, you're actually doing a lot of work. What actually happened is we moved tools. So we moved from just using Go for builds to a tool called Please. Please is like a Bazel-style build that allows you to do hermetic builds. So it only rebuilds the pieces of information or the DLLs or the binaries that have actually changed. So in most of the projects, it was laid out in a way that only one small package had changed at a time, so it would only rebuild that package and any corresponding packages. So they were like, wow, you know, what's absolutely changed? And it was ridiculous. And they coupled that with the number of builds per day. Now, we used TeamCity at that company, which is great CI tool. That's sure. I have to keep them happy. So we used TeamCity at that company, and what they actually did is they had a direct link to the TeamCity statistics page. So they could tell how fast the builds were, how many builds a day we were doing, the percentage of build successes, and then stupid other metrics like the percentage of time in build queue, right? And if that was going up, then they were like, you know, or if we were spending too much on build agents, because we were in the cloud, they would actually look at that and say, you're spending too much on build agents, you need to cut down the number of build agents. So we're doing stupid things. We were really doing stupid things. Now, these are useful metrics for some people, but it's not a success of a development team. Definitely the number of builds a day is not a success metric for a development team. Like, really, it's not. The number of GitHub stars and forks. This one's funny because it can be a vanity metric, but it can also be a useful metric. Okay? It can show that your project is actually useful. It can show that people are watching it and people are taking advantage of it. But at the same time, there was an internal email went around a company a while ago and said, we're trying to move this tool onto Homebrew. It needs at least 30 GitHub stars. Please can everyone in the company start it? It's like, so we've completely miscrewed the metrics on the usefulness of the number of stars on the project. So it's hard to do. Number of application downloads. I download a new app at least once per day. And then probably the next day after I've tried it once, I'll delete it. So again, the number of application downloads themselves don't really mean anything. It needs to be taken into context with other metrics that go with it. Story points. Anyone use story points? Okay, can anyone tell me why you use story points? And please be honest. For velocity. So how does story points relate to velocity? It's a genuine question because different people will give me different answers on this. Got it. Okay, so it's used as a way of being able to check to make sure you're like not going crazy in the amount of work you asked to do. So I'm not good at estimating. Okay, I'm really bad at estimating. I had a phone call with my boss 2 days ago, and he said, "How long do you think this will take?" I said a week. He asked another developer, they said 3 days. He asked another developer, they said 2 weeks. Okay, we're inherently bad at estimating. So I don't understand how we can break a task down into a conceptual value of story points. So what actually happened then is people started using crazy things like t-shirt sizes. Anyone use t-shirt sizes for For their yeah, see, again, what is a t-shirt in two different companies can be different sizes. They can have different fittings, okay? So it's the same thing. It's very difficult to understand the number of story points achieved per sprint because different developers will estimate things at different amounts. Now, maybe that's okay. But for me, it doesn't seem as though it's a useful metric. What is more useful metric is the number of the amount of value delivered in that sprint. Okay? Because we're very good at choosing things that are easy to get through in small tasks. But if they're not useful for our end customers, what's the point in doing them? Okay? If it's to inflate the number of story points that you've done, and it makes it look good to your boss, and it's very good for bonus, then you can start to see why it can be construed as a vanity metric. And then we even have meetings to look at the accuracy of our planning. And it's just time and time wasted. Meetings in themselves are a complete and utter vanity metric. I take my laptop to a meeting when I used to work in an office. And while I was there, I would be on my laptop the entire time and not really pay attention to my meeting. Like it happens. I would read Twitter, I'd tweet a little bit, maybe pop on Facebook. Because it just felt as though I was forced to be there. I have 2 15-minute meetings a week now. That's it. That is my mandatory meeting time. So it's important to understand that sometimes, just because you're in a meeting, it doesn't mean that it's a productive thing. So it can be vanity. I'm going to come back to cost of infrastructure, cost of travel, and cost of developer productivity because I can rant on these all day long. I really can. Code coverage. Does anyone believe that code coverage is a good thing or a bad thing? Oh, why?
Because it hides the fact that just because a test is testing something doesn't mean it's testing a good thing.
You're my new best friend. You're literally my new best friend. This came from a former developer I worked with. He was a Node.js developer. I had an argument with him face to face. And he told me that I was the bad developer because I wasn't achieving 100% code coverage. He actually said in front of all my peers and my boss, you are bad at your job because you are not testing all your work. You are not going for 100% code coverage. And I was blown away. Like, I wanted to punch him in the face. I literally did, but I thought it's probably best I don't do that. But it was at the point where I was like, this is crazy. Like, how can you legitimately say just because there's a number of 100% that you're good or bad at your job? He was probably right, but that's a different point. But it's much more around the fact of, if I don't want to spend time, hundreds and hundreds of tests that I have to change because one getter or setter has changed around your code base, it's crazy. So what I showed him is what I had outside-in tests that tested the entire system, and I could run them at any point, and I was crazy confident that any changes I would make would be caught. And I actually showed him that I made an adverse change to the behavior of a function, and my outside-in tests actually caught it. So you can't just look at this number. I once listened to, so I was a big TDD fan, a big TDD fan. Okay, and I used to be hugely into the software craftsmanship area and stuff like this. And they professed you must be doing this type of stuff. You really must be doing this type of stuff. And I met a guy in Paris. He's the organizer of Ncraft's conference. And he told me he's a TDD developer, but when he's finished the feature, he throws away all his tests. Because the tests for him are an implementation detail on how he gets from place A to place B. So the actual implementation. And he said it's not the other developer's responsibility to make changes and continually have to update all of the tests he was making as he was thinking through a feature. And it was completely changed how I looked at code coverage and code testing. It was amazing. So don't always just think because there's not 100%, you must strive for 100%. It's a complete rubbish metric. And there are still people being paid on lines of code per day. There really are. There are people that actually strive to have X amount of lines of code per day written. And I actually witnessed it when a guy, I looked at his code and I was like, this is we could make this much more concise. And he said, off the record, I won't get paid as much from this consultancy if the number of lines per code is less. Like, it's 2019. If you're still paying people in lines of code, this is ridiculous. Write JSON for a living. Okay, you can inflate it hugely. Anybody have any others that they think are vanity metrics? Untapped check-ins. Yes, also a vanity metric. Any other vanity metrics, like legitimate vanity metrics? So people will have their own, okay? People will be able to actually work through a lot of them. I have my worst offenders, okay? My favorites, if you will. Number 1, cost of travel. Where do I even start with cost of travel? Time is money, okay? Time is actually money. A great example is I don't want to lose my time when I have to travel for work. Okay, so let's say I have to have this is a hypothetical situation. It actually happened. I was told I had to be in an office in a Southeastern Asia country on a Tuesday morning. I went back to said company and said, okay, the flight will cost me 2,500 euros, and I'll be there on Tuesday morning, and I'll be in the office by lunchtime, ready for the meeting in the afternoon. They said, no, the flight is only 700 euros. And I said, no, the cost of a business class flight is 2,500. And they said, but you're not flying business class. We don't allow people to fly business class. You have to leave on Sunday, you'll arrive on Monday, and then you can sleep and feel refreshed for Tuesday. My response was, am I going to be paid for giving my day up on Sunday? They said, no, of course you're not. It's a fly-in day. We'll give you your per diem as normal. So I said, what's the point in me doing that if I can leave one day later? And it's like, let's be honest, 2,500 is not really a huge amount for a business class flight. And I know companies that look after their staff extremely well, and their well-being is very well catered for and very well looked after. And I flat out refused the trip. I says, I'm not going. I literally said I'm not going. And my boss said I was being childish and stubborn. I don't believe I was, okay? My employer at that point was Cheap. And they're a very well-known brand. Very well-known brand. My old employers, not new ones. Okay? I shouldn't have to give up my time and my comfort and my health because my company was cheap. Always remember that. And the thing is that when companies look after their employees really well, it's one of the things that the employees tell other people a lot. They're like, my company's awesome. They look after us so well. You know, I can go on a 5 or 6 hour flight and get business class and feel great. And I can work the entire way and stuff like that. But one of the things that we don't do enough is we don't name and shame companies who treat us badly. So we really should start to do that. Same happens at conferences, I'm afraid. This is one of those conferences that looks after their speakers very, very, very well. They provide transport from the airport to and from the conference, the hotels, the flights, everything. Okay, there are conferences out there that even though they're charging you a lot of money as attendees, the speakers do not even get their flights and accommodation paid for. They're expected to pay their own and fly in for free. Okay, I've started refusing to do those conferences now because the companies are just making money off the speakers arriving and giving a talk, and the attendees are paying for it. It's not fair. It's really not fair. You're giving up your time and your and everything for it. So cost of travel is important. Don't cheap out, because it will cause you problems. And just because of that number, like that 800 compared to that 2,500, is a case of it may seem like a lot of money in essence, but it's caused a lot more hassle and a lot more mistrust between companies and their employees. Honorable mentions: cost of infrastructure and cost of developer productivity. Infrastructure is one of those things that in 2019 can be automated. I understand that, yes, there are some companies that still have to work in their own data centers because of different reasons, and they've spent a lot of money throughout the years on actually building a data center. But if you were in the cloud, there is zero excuse in 2019 that you have not automated the deployment of your infrastructure. So therefore, if you have automated it, you can bring it up and destroy it at any point. Which means if you have a development environment or a testing environment or a staging environment, you can have a trigger in your system that spins up the environment at 7 a.m., ready for your developers to start their day, and at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever it is at night, again, it will be destroyed. You're immediately saving your company all that money of the time that it's not being used. Okay? Because we have an excuse when... Who's heard the excuses from their QA department? We can't test as well as we could do because our environment is not like production. I've used that excuse 100 times. And it happens everywhere. And then we're told, but it's expensive to replicate the production environment and it's only a development environment. But if it's scripted and can be brought up and down very easily at any time, then there's no excuse for environments to be long-lived and you can save money and create the same environments, which means you can mimic real-world situations. It's really important. And the cost of developer productivity. Give me the tools to do my job and I'll deliver. Okay? If somebody asks you for a copy of an IDE or a copy of a tool or they need €1,000 to go and do some training, give them the money to do it. Because by giving you the tools to do it, or by not giving me the tools to do it, or the available resources to do it, you're immediately breaking my trust. If you're breaking my trust, I am not going to give you 100%. Okay? I have worked with developers that don't care anymore because they're in a situation of the company don't really care about us, so why should I care back? Okay? But if you work for a company that's really good at giving you the information and the tooling that you need and the resources that you need, people will work, they'll give their 100%. Now, I'm not saying by giving people the tools, they'll work 20-hour days. That's not what I'm saying. Please don't take that that's what I'm trying to say. You're going to give people money and they're going to work 20-hour days. It's not that at all. It's going to be is that when they're actually focused on building what they're building, they're going to give you 100% of their engagement. They're not going to be messing around and doing different things or working on open source, when they should be doing something else. That happens as part of normal workflow anyway. But a great way to look at this is there are companies that when you start on your first day, they're really, really good at having all the available things that you need. So you arrive at your desk, you have your laptop, your screen, you have your key badge, your swag, your t-shirts, your hoodies, all of these different things, okay? And you feel great. And the first thing you do is you start to tell other people about it, okay? There are companies out there that won't even give you your laptop for weeks because someone in purchasing has forgotten to order it or has forgot to click a button or it's going through this change management system that requires like 9 different people to sign off a laptop. Now, immediately when you join that company, you're starting to think to yourself, why have I bothered? If it's going to take me 3 weeks to get up and running and get everything working, then what's the point in working here, right? If it's for a laptop, what's it going to be to get this tool or that tool? So, again, the monetary value might seem like a lot, but you actually get a lot in return, okay? Employees' happiness is much more than money because we as developers are... I was going to say something bad. We whinge a lot. We're just bored. We hate the world, okay? And we will tell everybody if we hate the world. But when we're happy, we're happy. Like what happens if a company took away your free coffee? You go crazy. It's the same thing. Give me the tools that I need and I'll deliver for you. So what metrics are useful? There's a lot. Okay, I've told you, right, everything in the world is bad right now. Okay, because as I said, I'm an angry Irish person who hates everything. But there is a lot of what you can do in order to take away real metrics from real world situations. So work in progress. Somebody mentioned about like velocity. Okay, and that is an important thing to measure because I don't believe in Scrum, by the way, for those that use Scrum. And I'm not saying you should like stop using Scrum at all. Please don't think like that. But there are situations because of the methodologies that you use that you can end up with a lot of things in progress and not a lot of things delivered. Okay, it happens. It's happened to me well in the past a long time. And by putting in like work in progress or by measuring work in progress, you can put limits in place which will stop that type of thing from happening. Okay, so if you're not measuring your work in progress, then please start measuring it. Okay, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to understand when you have overcommitted when you're not going to deliver everything for the end of your sprint. Cycle time and lead time. Does anybody know the difference between cycle time and lead time? We're back to no one caring. Oh, amazing. So lead time is the time in which an idea was developed until the time in which it's about to be produced. Okay, so it's all that time before development happens. Okay, so like when business analysts, if you have them, when they're starting to look at it, and when you're starting to do like engagement with users to understand if it's a useful feature or not, that's your lead time. Cycle time is the time from when it starts development until when it's delivered. Okay, when it's in production, when users have their real hands on it. And again, I'm going to refer to OpenTable here because we didn't measure cycle time and lead time. Okay, now lead time is strange. Anyone use Jira? Okay, there's probably things in your Jira. There's going to be a project that's like classed as backlog, and there'll be things in Jira that's like 7, 8, 9 years old. Right? Well, you think that it was a good idea, but it's just there just in case someday you get around to implementing it. But of course, we don't measure that, and we can't see the lead times of all of our issues, because realistically, if you haven't implemented it after 7 years, you're probably not going to implement it now. Okay? Now, maybe there's a use case that's there, but if users haven't needed it in the 7 years, then it's maybe kind of pointless keeping it in your issue tracking system. Maybe kind of pointless. Okay, so if you measure it, you can clear things out and keep things fresh and keep ideas fresh. Now, cycle time is very interesting for us at OpenTable. And I actually think we measured the cycle time. And I'm just going to see if I still... One second. I have a graph here of it, maybe. I do not. Oh, I do. Yes. This was after. I'm just trying to find the before. I apologize. It's okay. We can just show this one. Now, our cycle time at OpenTable was huge. Okay? And this is the end result. We didn't measure it before, and it became very, very, very difficult to understand how long things took to get through production, okay, from development into production. So before this is the result, it used to be that the issue was reported, and then you'd wait maybe a week before the developer started working on it. And when they started working on it, it used to take almost 4 weeks to make itself back into production, into the master branch. Okay, when it was there for a week, then QA would pick it up, and it would take about 3 or 4 days for QA to start understanding and working on it. And then a release team would pick it up at the end of testing week, once it was all signed off, and they would pick it up, and they'd actually start to be ready for release. They create the artifacts for production, and then it would sit in this like holding pattern for a few days. Okay, and it would take about an hour for deployment. Now, when we measured this for the CTO, because it was a new CTO, he came in and he was like, why is it taking 6 weeks for all of this stuff to go through to production? And we drew it out, and we could see the numbers at the top are after. The numbers in red are, before. Okay, so he looked at this graph straight away, and he said, there's 19 and a half days of waiting time. Okay. Now, for those who can calculate it out, 19 and a half days is basically 4 work weeks. Okay, so out of the 6 work weeks that we were taking things to go through to production, 4 of them, the work was idle. So he said, why can't we start to cut away these idle times? So we started looking at the first one. He said, why does it take 4 days between creating a hotfix and release artifacts to when you actually release them? And we all sat in the room and went, I don't know. So we said, let's cut that one away. And we cut away those 4 days. Now, immediately we cut the cycle down by like a week. Okay, 4 days is almost a week. Okay. Then he said, why after the tests are signed off, does it take 4 days before we create the release artifact? And again, we just went, And we just cut every single piece of it away. And by the time I left the company, after we put in like a full CD pipeline, which allowed us to like get rid of all of these steps, we could deploy from when something went into master to production in about 14 minutes, including running all the tests and all the automated tests. Now, it took a long time to get there. It really did. So, but it all came because we were measuring different things. And the most important thing we were measuring was our cycle time and our lead times. So these are extremely useful metrics that you can pick up and you can measure, and you can actually implement real value in your company just by measuring those alone. Mean time to resolution. Does anybody measure the time it takes from when a critical bug is created in your bug tracker until when it's fixed? Nobody. Whoa, one, two, maybe a couple, okay? A few people, right? Now, by understanding that, you can then start to ask further questions, okay? So let's say, for example, the mean time to resolution for a critical bug is 4 hours. But the time taken to deploy a normal change through our system is 2 weeks. Why is there a difference? What's the difference between a normal change and a bug? And you can start to understand exactly what's going on, and you can really start to push it and start to like edge away at your like developer thought process here. Then you've got mean time between failures. Anybody measure that? Mean time between critical bugs. This one's incredibly important to measure, because if you don't measure that, you don't know when a deployment has gone horribly wrong. Okay, so let's say on an average day, you get 3 critical bugs. Okay, and they happen at certain points of the day. There's no pattern to them, there's nothing like that. But you've just made a deployment, and the number of critical bugs in that day has gone from 3 as normal to 20. If there was a metric there and you could see that, wouldn't you be able to look at it and say, oh, something's wrong? Something's really, really wrong here. And you can then start to take appropriate action based on that. So by measuring that, you can really understand where the problems may lie after something happens. Application crash rates. Any like mobile developers here? Anybody do mobile development? Is it still a thing? It's a joke. A lot of people who I met who are mobile developers, they don't know when their application crashes. They don't know when end users have like really frustrating times with the applications. So, of course, if you're a hobbyist mobile developer and you've put something out there, then that's completely different thing, right? If you're just like creating an app to test and you're putting it out there and there's crashes, then no, you know. But if you are a company, a professional company that people A, are paying for, or B, lots of people, you want volume of using the app, and they have a horrible experience around crashing of the application, you need to measure that so you can take appropriate action. You need to be able to fix that. Because the metric that you get is not the amount of people opening the application, it's the amount of people actually having crashes based on the application. I said earlier the number of issues and pull requests is a vanity metric. But one thing that's not, and you can actually get a good metric out of everything here, is the rate of issue and pull request opening and closing. Okay? Again, let's think back to the Jira example. If there's issues in your tracker that have been around for 7 years, and you're not going to implement them, it's probably best to look at actually just closing it, right? Because they're just going to construe metrics that you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of issues, when technically you don't. Those are like people reporting something years and years ago that you haven't closed, or you haven't, you don't want to implement in the feature, but you've just left it there just in case. So it's important, again, to cut away dead wood so you can understand what's going on in the system. Release cycle time. I said the number of deploys a day is a pointless metric. But based on the back of that, what is a very good metric to read is how fast your release cycle can be. Because by finding out how fast it can be, you can react to situations within your environment. A great example here is the company I work for now. We track the Kubernetes API. Okay, we actually track the changes in the Kubernetes API. And we need to be fast to get the changes from the Kubernetes API and their SDKs into our product, because our users expect that to be there. And we have started measuring how long it takes for us to get those features from upstream into our products. I think at the minute it's about 30 minutes. Okay, but the tests take a long time to run because of the fact that, it's against real infrastructure. So we're trying to make that better to give a better user experience. But if we didn't track it and we didn't understand, we would have questions from users saying, hey, when will you support version X of this software? Like, we've seen a lot of it in .NET software when the .NET Core 3 was brought out. People were starting to ask, when's it going to support this version? And people were having to make changes much faster. And the last one that I think is useful, conversion metrics. I again go back to the conversion funnel. You need to understand those conversion metrics. How many people use your software on a daily basis? Is it a one-time only thing and they never use it again? How many people come back and use it again? How many people continually come back and use it again and again and again? This is a small sample. It's not targeted towards anything specific. But these are areas in which you can immediately improve your developer workflow just by measuring these things. So am I saying measure anything? Measure everything? No. Don't measure everything. I used to tell people to measure everything. And I was in a situation where I worked at a company where we had 1.5 terabyte of data in an Elasticsearch cluster. Now, 1.5 terabyte of data in an Elasticsearch cluster is a lot of metrics. I used maybe 100 kilobytes of those metrics. Okay, but I used to be in the opinion, put it in the Elasticsearch, we'll look at it someday. Okay, and then Elasticsearch crashed. And I lost all the data. And I had to restore from backups. And it took days, and we were down for a long time. And the amount of time that it took and the amount of money it took to maintain the cluster became huge. Okay? It's important to understand that success isn't based on numbers per se. Success is based on value and the functionality that you're adding for users. If there is a measurement you can make around that value or about the functionality, then make that metric. Don't just get metrics and throw them in there hoping you can get a valuable metric out of it. Up until recently, this is a bigger story over beers, I promise, but the progress of the team I was working on was actually on things like, as I said, builds per day, PRs merged, and even the number of commits a day. Like really the number of commits a day were actually being reported up per developer because they believed the best developers were coding more and pushing more code into our repository. This is a crazy thing that we're starting to understand. They had no understanding of the functionality we were building, and they had no understanding of the value that we were trying to give back to the users. There's a summary, okay? There's two types of metrics. There's vanity metrics and there's actionable metrics. But they are not one without the other, okay? So a vanity metric can have an actionable metric inside it. And of course, you can't have an actionable metric unless you have a vanity metric that can be pulled out as well, okay? Let's care less about the vanity metrics and more about the actionable metrics, okay? Let's care about understanding the value for our users and understanding the results that we can get from putting features in front of users to understand if we've created better products, and then we will actually have a better and more healthy organization. Thank you so much. I know there's like one more talk or two more talks left for the end of the day, but I hope you've been able to take something away.